Part 1. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 1. Alas. Still not working? Just a little bit, almost. Yuan Meng opened his eyes, sighed deeply unwillingly, stood up slowly, soothed his numb hands and feet, and slowly walked out of the room. This is an independent villa covering an area of more than 500 square meters, surrounded by mountains and water, facing north and south, very quiet and peaceful. Except for a relatively wide asphalt road leading to the city and a few villas around, there is basically no one. This kind of place can be said to be very suitable for cultivating the body and mind, and Yuan Meng appeared here for no other reason, but because this place is suitable for cultivating the body and mind. Speaking of this, we have to talk about Yuan Meng himself. Yuan Meng, 30 years old, was born as an orphan. Relying on his own ability, he started from scratch and created a considerable family business. Otherwise, it would be impossible to buy an independent villa covering an area of more than 500 square meters in Qingping Mountain. Qingping Mountain is not a well-known mountain resort, but it is also well known in Qingyang City. It is beautiful and elegant. Several retro villas are looming among the mountains, rivers, and trees. It is indeed a good place for leisure and entertainment, and it is also a good choice for cultivating the body and mind. The villas here are naturally valuable. Those who can afford villas here are either rich or noble. Moreover, even if you have money, you may not be able to buy it. Yuan Meng spent a lot of money and thought hard to buy it. After Yuan Meng bought this villa, he lived here for a long time, and even his own property has been sold out. Even except for his 3 or 2 good friends and some daily necessities that he occasionally ordered, he basically cut off contact with the outside world. The reason why Yuan Meng did this was naturally not because he was tired of the secular world and wanted to live in seclusion. Yuan Meng came here to live a semi-secluded life, but he had no choice because he had cancer, and it was the late stage. When these were found out, Yuan Meng almost collapsed. Damn, I just built such a foundation, and I haven't had time to enjoy it, and you do this to me? But it has already happened, what can he do? He can only accept the reality in despair. He refused the doctor's suggestion to be hospitalized for treatment, but sold his assets and came to this villa with excellent scenery and environment to recuperate and live in retirement. Well, in fact, it can be said in another way, that is, waiting to die. Otherwise, what else can be done? Of course, no one wants to die, and Yuan Meng is no exception. Since he came here, he has almost searched all kinds of Chinese and Western medicine prescriptions on the market. Even all the true or false exercises, various Buddhist and Taoist scriptures, and even those treasured by various sects, he spent a lot of money to copy many of them. In addition to drinking some Chinese medicine that inhibits cancer and regulates the body and mind on a regular basis, he studies these exercises and Chinese medicine prescriptions in the hope of obtaining methods to regulate the body and mind and prolong his life. Well, you may say that this is not a desperate attempt to seek medical treatment. This is simply courting death. So many people have spent their entire lives studying and have not gained anything. What can you, a dying person, gain in such a short time? This world still has to be scientific. If you are sick, you must treat it well. You must believe in science. If you receive treatment, it should, may, perhaps, probably, almost, be able to prolong your life. However, how could Yuan Meng not know these, as mentioned above, desperate to seek medical treatment? That's right, Yuan Meng is desperate to seek medical treatment, but what else can he do? As for following the doctor's advice and being hospitalized for treatment, he just laughed. What's the point, it's still incurable. Yuan Meng didn't want to spend the rest of his life lying on the hospital bed, struggling and groaning in pain, and eventually dying. Instead of that, it's better to come here and spend a few days of peace, although the body may go on strike at any time. But, haha, as the saying goes, death is inevitable, so just live as long as you want. And being able to come to this world is already a great blessing from God, and it's a big profit. Yuan Meng doesn't want to struggle painfully on the hospital bed for more than 10 years again, and then take his last breath in pain. Yes, you read it right, again. The reason why Yuan Meng was able to rely on himself and become a genius who started from scratch and laid this huge foundation. The most important thing, well, is that he is still a time traveler. He, Yuan Meng, the most miserable time traveler in history, traveled through time in a winter with snowflakes, which is actually nothing. But he was a baby when he traveled through time, and a baby lying naked on the roadside. On the first day of traveling through time, he almost froze to death, becoming the traveler with the shortest travel time. As for parents, they didn't have any. Yuan Meng seriously suspected that he traveled through time physically at the moment he took his last breath. It's just that due to some special reasons, his body returned to the baby period. Because he looked exactly the same as in his previous life, perhaps because of traveling through time and other reasons, he had the phenomenon of rejuvenation. It's just that the rejuvenation is a bit too much, and it's just a direct return to the babyhood. If some kind-hearted people hadn't sent him to the orphanage, I'm afraid Yuan Meng would have died completely on the first day of time travel. But after that, Yuan Meng was like the protagonists in time travel, relying on his adult experience and memory in his previous life, and he was a leading figure whether in elementary school or university. Even Yuan Meng's mentor in college once wanted to let him enter the field of scientific research and achieve greater achievements and development. It's a pity that Yuan Meng, who was reborn, knew his own family affairs. He was not an extremely talented person. The reason why he was able to become a famous figure in the school was because of his accumulation in his previous life and his experience as an adult. Ambition and knowledge. If not, he is just an ordinary person. Just look at his past life and you will know that if he is really a genius, he will not be just an ordinary wage earner. After graduation, relying on a more forward-looking vision and what I had seen and heard in my previous life, I had a smooth journey in business. But something unexpected happened. Just when he had a bigger plan and was heading towards the richest man in the country, who would have thought that a bolt from the blue would hit him? He had cancer, late-stage cancer. At that moment, Yuan Meng really almost didn't collapse. He still had great years and his career was booming, but he got cancer again. Well, Yuan Meng had reason to suspect that this was not cancer at all, but a recurrence of his cancer. Because Yuan Meng suffered from cancer in his previous life and struggled in pain for nearly 10 years on the hospital bed. He tried all kinds of folk remedies and treatments, but in the end, it only made him more painful and he was left to linger for a while. In this life, Yuan Meng not only looks exactly the same as before, but he also has the same cancer as in his previous life. This is also the main reason why Yuan Meng suspected that he was not reborn as a soul at all, but as a body. Otherwise, how can there be such a coincidence in this world? The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 2. Having experienced fighting against illness on the sickbed in his previous life, Yuan Meng was diagnosed with cancer in this life. After the initial period of collapse, he rejected the doctor's strong suggestion to be hospitalized for treatment. Instead, he sold all his physical properties and bought an independent villa in Qingping Mountain, where he lived a life of self-cultivation. Well, or waiting for death, after all, life is about to come to an end, why bother to work hard? In the end it is still a handful of yellow soil and a wisp of green smoke. In this case, it is better to live a comfortable and relaxing life for a few days. Although after knowing that he had cancer, Yuan Meng already knew that his life was running out. But who is willing to wait for the end of life and the arrival of death? Yuan Meng, of course, is no exception. On the contrary, because he had died once in his previous life, he didn't want to lose his life again. Although Yuan Meng didn't want to go to the hospital, lie on the bed, endure various treatments, and then die in pain. However, that was because Yuan Meng knew that with the current medical level, it was impossible to cure his cancer. But it did not mean that Yuan Meng gave up treatment completely. He still sought other treatment methods with the mentality of luck and just in case. For example, although Chinese medicine conditioning cannot completely cure the disease, it can always slightly relieve the pain and prolong life. For another example, in a desperate situation, Yuan Meng collected various martial arts books, although most of them proved that they were just some mysterious and deceptive things. Among those martial arts, the mysterious things that were boasted, Yuan Meng did not feel that they had any effect. But some of them did help him a lot. Just like most of the martial arts and Qigong, there are methods to calm the mind and relax the body, which are still very useful in regulating the body and mind. What Yuan Meng valued most were some meditation methods. Perhaps it was the threat of death and the tempering of his will to fight against the disease on the sickbed in his previous life. Perhaps it was because of the time travel, or perhaps it was a combination of various circumstances that made Yuan Meng burst out with unprecedented potential. Through in-depth research on the large number of meditation methods he collected, combined with the descriptions in some novels he read in his previous life, and based on his own situation, Yuan Meng actually created a set of more advanced meditation methods. Well, in fact, it is not necessarily so advanced. Yuan Meng didn't know if there was a real way to practice in this world. Anyway, the so-called magical secrets he collected were all exaggerated. But in fact, they were just visualizing something, or mountains and rivers, or the sun, moon, stars, or even a certain god, which could make people calm down. And Yuan Meng directly visualized a dark and boundless void, removing everything else, so that he could enter a deeper level of spiritual tranquility. According to his own situation, Yuan Meng constantly deepened his ability to enter the deep state of concentration. It is best to completely cut off the induction from reality. Only when he wants to wake up from this deep state of concentration, his mind will wake up. If this is the case, doesn't it mean that there is any danger in the outside world, and he has no feeling and can only wait for death? Oh, Yuan Meng wants this effect. He wants to enter this deepest state of concentration after his body reaches the limit. In this way, he avoids the pain of suffering from the disease and dies in this deepest state of concentration without knowing or feeling anything. In the end, he succeeded, but also failed. Perhaps because Yuan Meng had experienced death in his previous life, coupled with the reason of reincarnation, he did enter the deepest state of concentration very quickly. However, Yuan Meng's sense of the outside world has not been completely lost. He still has a little sense of it. As long as his body is threatened to a certain extent, Yuan Meng will wake up naturally. This actually did not achieve the goal that Yuan Meng wanted to achieve. After all, when he was on the verge of death, his life was in danger of death all the time. Under this situation, it was actually difficult for him to enter that deep state of concentration. However, Yuan Meng had no other way. This had already reached the limit of what he could achieve. He could only take one step at a time. However, Yuan Meng recently felt that his meditation had reached a bottleneck. He felt that as long as he could break through this bottleneck, his meditation would definitely achieve a greater breakthrough. It was just that there was always a little bit of a gap, that is, he could not break through that bottleneck, which made Yuan Meng very uncomfortable. Slowly walking outside the room, Yuan Meng leaned against the door, looking at the slowly falling sunset in a trance, until the endless darkness swallowed up the last ray of the sun's afterglow bit by bit. Just now, he slowly walked back to the room, had a light dinner, and a bowl of bitter medicinal soup, and then walked back to his own practice room. This is the villa's own gym, but due to physical reasons, Yuan Meng can't do too much intense exercise, so he simply cleared all the fitness equipment and transformed it into a practice room. Well, In fact, it just added an incense table, an incense burner, and a cushion. After lighting a piece of fine sandalwood that has a calming effect, Yuan Meng sat cross-legged on the futon, closed his eyes, and fell into a state of concentration. Yuan Meng has decided that this time he will do the desperate thing. If he fails, he will never leave seclusion. As he entered samadhi, Yuan Meng's mind quickly calmed down, and he said quietly, faintly, and silently. The connection with the outside world also began to be severed one by one, turning a blind eye and hearing nothing. In the end, even the feeling of the body became vague. Yuan Meng only felt that his mind was sinking continuously, until it seemed that it had touched a thin film and could no longer sink. Of course, it is definitely not a real film, it is just a mental feeling. Then, Yuan Meng began to accumulate strength, wanting to break this film. After an unknown amount of time, he finally felt that the strength he had accumulated was enough, and he was a little ready to take action. However, Yuan Meng quickly calmed down and suppressed it. He had had this feeling before when he was in concentration, but it turned out that it was just an illusion. Yuan Meng has made countless such breakthroughs, but the film is like a piece of extremely tough cowhide, although it feels like it will break at any time. But in fact, it is unbreakable and always blocks Yuan Meng's breakthrough over and over again. Therefore, this time Yuan Meng did not rush to make a breakthrough as quickly as before, but continued to accumulate strength slowly. Until Yuan Meng felt that the power he had accumulated had reached a limit and began to gradually exceed the control of his mind. Break. Only then did Yuan Meng let out a deep cry in his heart, concentrating all his mind, carrying all the power he had accumulated, and the will to be benevolent if he didn't succeed. All at once, they struck crazily towards the depths of his soul, where the shackles were. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 3. Pop. It seemed as if a voice sounded directly in Yuan Meng's heart. He only felt that his whole mind suddenly lightened, and then appeared in an unknown place. The moment Yuan Meng's mind appeared here, it began to spread out involuntarily. In a short time, it had filled the entire unknown place. This is a void place with no form and substance, no existence, and no time and space. The space here is infinite, but infinitely small, like an illusory spiritual space, but not exactly the same. When Yuan Meng's mind and will completely permeated this void, it naturally merged with it. It also understood the origin of this void. It is not wrong to say that it is a spiritual space here, but it is not complete and accurate enough. This place is more like a reflection of Yuan Meng's body. Everything in his body, the material body in reality, the spiritual space in concept, all of this, are integrated into one here and turned into this void. Now, in this void, apart from Yuan Meng's mind and will, there is nothing else, and even the concept of time and space does not exist. Therefore, Yuan Meng simply named this void according to this characteristic. He called it Tai space, taken from Tai among the 5 innate Tai. Tai is the beginning of the spirit without seeing the Qi. Tai, the birth of the spirit, but even the most basic Qi is not visible and does not exist. In Tai space, apart from Yuan Meng's mind and will, there is no other external object. But Yuan Meng can feel some conditions of the body according to some characteristics in Tai space. It is a very wonderful feeling. After Yuan Meng's mind and will merge with Tai space, it can be said that he is Tai space is him, and everything in Tai space is under his control. However, some places, although they are also under his control, are always inconsistent with other places, and these places are still expanding outward. Yuan Meng naturally had a sense of enlightenment in his heart about these places. This was where the reflection of the cancer cells in his body was. When Yuan Meng felt all this, He couldn't help but murmur in his heart, so the cancer cells in his body have begun to spread. Yuan Meng smiled bitterly, but he also truly confirmed that the research on cancer cells in reality, that is, cancer cells, are really his own cells. Because his cancer cells are also projected in this space, and in this space, they are also under his absolute control, but they are incompatible with other areas, and there is a sense of disharmony. Well, you said that cancer cells are his own cells, and everyone on Earth knows it. Well, what I want to say is that this world is not the Earth, it is called Blue Star. You also said that the people of Blue Star also know it. But who can really experience this? And now Yuan Meng has truly experienced it personally, but he would rather not know it, because the projection shown in Tai space is really too scary. How to say it? Tai space, infinitely large, but infinitely small. The reason why he is said to be infinitely small is that Yuan Meng spent only a very short time to spread his spiritual will throughout the entire Tai space. And most of this time was used by him to merge with the Tai space, otherwise the Tai space would have no time and space concepts. As Yuan Meng's mind turned, his mind and will would spread throughout the Tai space. And it is not wrong to say that the Tai space is infinite, because it also has the characteristics of the spiritual space. What characteristics are, that is, the bigger the heart is, the bigger the world is. Theoretically, as long as you can imagine it, the endless world, the endless infinite multiverse, the endless chaotic primordial void sea, Tai space can easily accommodate it. In this case, what is the situation when the real body is mapped to the Tai space? That is, the reflection of a cell in the Tai space is equivalent to a galaxy. This is just a normal situation. Yuan Meng has not really imagined the endless world in the Tai space. Otherwise, the reflection of a cell in the real body in the Tai space is equivalent to an endless multiverse, or even larger. Then what will happen if the cancer cells in Yuan Meng's body spread and are reflected in the Tai space? That is, every minute and every second, there are galaxies of space that are transformed into spaces different from the normal Tai space. If you look at it this way, isn't it more terrifying? Maybe it's just a moment of distraction, and a galaxy of Tai space has been transformed. However, despite this, Yuan Meng doesn't have any good way. Although he can control everything in the Tai space, he can even transform those different areas back into normal Tai space. However, this is actually useless. Because in the final analysis, Tai space is just an illusory reflection of Yuan Meng's real body and mind. What happens in his real body will definitely be reflected in Tai space and have an impact here. However, no matter how much Yuan Meng changes Tai space, it will not have any effect on his real body. Just like the monkey trying to catch the moon in the elementary school textbook, no matter how you catch the moon in the water, what effect can it have on the real moon hanging high in the sky? On the contrary, the waxing and waning of the real moon will be reflected in the water. Although the connection between Tai space and Yuan Meng is far more mysterious and close than the reflection of the moon in the water. But in essence, it is still an illusory existence and cannot have any effect on reality or the body. However, after he opened up Tai space, all these things could not discourage Yuan Meng's enthusiasm at all. Since he was able to open up such a Tai space that penetrated deep into the body and soul in this world that emphasizes science through full-hearted meditation. Then can he go a step further and reach the point of interfering with reality with his mind, thereby delaying or even completely curing his own cancer? However, Yuan Meng did not have a good idea about the future development direction. After all, whether it was the so-called martial arts classics or the classic Buddhist, Taoist, and Confucian classics. But there has never been such a situation where the reflection of the body and the mind are combined to open up a Tai space. All Yuan Meng can do now is to desperately accumulate his own mental power. After all, he relied on the accumulated mental power to break through the bottleneck and open up this Tai space. After thinking about it, Yuan Meng silently felt the Tai space again, and then he left the Tai space with a move of his mind. As Yuan Meng's mind returned, all the senses on his body began to reappear one by one. Then Yuan Meng felt a pain in his body, accompanied by a strong sense of dizziness, and his whole brain was drowsy. Without saying a word, Yuan Meng lay flat on the ground. For a moment, he only felt that the whole room was spinning up and down, left and right, and even the floor under him was up and down and spinning continuously. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 4. After a long while, Yuan Meng slowly came back to his senses and struggled to get up. Although the dizziness in his brain had improved a lot, the pain in his body had not been alleviated at all, but became clearer. This made Yuan Meng frown slightly, wondering what was going on. But he didn't have the mind to think about it now. He endured the discomfort of his body, slowly moved back to his bedroom, and slammed himself heavily on the soft bed. In a more intense pain, Yuan Meng frowned, slowly closed his eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. Only the twitching corners of his mouth, the slightly frowning eyebrows, and the faint water stains on Yuan Meng's forehead and temples showed that he was not sleeping well and comfortably. After a dreamless sleep until dawn, Yuan Meng groaned in pain and slowly opened his eyes. At this time, Yuan Meng's brain no longer felt dizzy, but was clearer than ever before. Some things that were incomprehensible and vague in memory in the past were now clearly presented in his mind. As long as he thought about it, he could quickly get the answer. However, at the same time, the pain in his body became clearer. Yes, it was clearer, not more painful. There is an essential difference between the two. If it is more painful, it means that the condition has worsened and the degree of pain has increased by several points. And clearer means that in fact, the pain in Yuan Meng's body has not increased much, but his senses are more acute and he can feel this pain more. It seems that it should be the breakthrough of my realm that has greatly enhanced my mental power. So while my brain is clearer, it also makes my senses more acute. Enduring the discomfort and pain of his body, Yuan Meng frowned and thought thoughtfully. If Yuan Meng were an ordinary person, it would be a good thing for his senses to become more acute, especially when it comes to physical exercise. It would be like a divine help. It's just that Yuan Meng already had cancer and was slowly getting worse. Before his realm breakthrough, his senses were relatively dull and he had gotten used to all kinds of physical discomfort. So Yuan Meng didn't feel the discomfort and pain caused by cancer cells to his body very clearly. But this time, Yuan Meng's realm breakthrough, although generally speaking, gave him great benefits, a clear mind and sharp senses. The downside is that because of his overly sharp senses, the pain caused by the cancer cells in Yuan Meng's body was clearly felt by him at once, which was not so wonderful. But for the time being, there is no better way. I can only hope that I can improve the situation after another breakthrough. Yuan Meng grinned bitterly, endured the pain in his body, went to the kitchen to cook a bowl of porridge, and after eating and drinking with difficulty, he came to his practice room again and started practicing again. It seems that I should find a nanny to cook, Yuan Meng snorted and thought to himself. After all, the pain of the body is really unbearable. If I can hire a nanny to cook for me, I can free up a lot of time to practice. Not only can I quickly improve my realm, but I can also enter the Tai space to avoid the need to endure the pain of the body when I am awake. But there is no rush for these. I will enter the Tai space first. Although Yuan Meng can faintly sense the Tai space, I don't know if I can enter it easily. Yuan Meng closed his eyes, slowly calmed his mind, tried not to pay attention to the pain in his body, and thought about entering the Tai space. Originally, Yuan Meng thought it would be difficult. After all, because of the pain of the body, it is not easy to quickly enter the state of concentration under such circumstances, let alone enter the deep state of concentration like yesterday and break through the barrier to enter the Tai space. But who knew that Yuan Meng had come to the Tai space again with just a slight thought, and the familiar feeling came to his heart. The infinitely small and infinitely large Tai space was all shrouded by his mind and brought under his control. Moreover, the pain of the outside body has been completely isolated from him. Of course, Yuan Meng can still feel it faintly, but it is not very strong, just like someone gently pressing and touching the body. And there is a continuous force in his body, which is slowly infiltrating into the Tai space. With the entry of this force, Yuan Meng can clearly feel that his mental power, or Tai space, is constantly increasing. After all, Yuan Meng's mind has been completely integrated with Tai space. The two are originally one and the same. There is no saying that if one side increases its power, the other side will gain nothing, because they are inseparable and will grow and progress together. And this power to enter Tai space should be the human spirit, so it can enter this Tai space dominated by the mind. As for why the mental power cannot be felt in the real world, let alone releasing the mental power out of the body to move objects through the air, even the mental power in the body is difficult to feel. Yuan Meng guessed that this should be related to the external environment. After all, this is a materialistic world on the technological side. Perhaps the world itself does not allow the emergence of these mysterious forces. The reason why Yuan Meng was able to open up this Tai space through constant meditation may be related to his crossing. He crossed into this world, perhaps breaking a little rule blockade of this world. Therefore, Yuan Meng was able to open up this Tai space. Or perhaps it was because Yuan Meng had been a human for 2 lives and was constantly fighting against the disease, so his spirit was very strong, far beyond ordinary people. When he exited the Tai space had more than doubled. Yuan Meng slowly opened his eyes. Even though he was prepared, he still groaned again. Ah! Looking at the time, only about an hour had passed, and Yuan Meng shook his head and sighed in some distress. Although the Tai space is good, he is equivalent to the God of creation and the existence of the world's master in it, and he will not feel the pain of the real body. But it was too empty, without any objects, sounds, or even the concept of time and space. At the beginning, it was not obvious, but Yuan Meng felt very curious and experimented with his ideas, such as creating a world composed of spirits as described in the novels he had read in his previous life. And because Tai space and Yuan Meng were originally one, he might not be able to create a real world or even an atom. However, in this illusory quasi-spiritual space, it was very easy for him to create a spiritual world. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 5. Yuan Meng only had a thought to open up a primitive world in this Tai space. However, before he could evolve all the things in it, his mind was about to be completely exhausted by the endless immortals, Buddhas, gods, and demons. Moreover, this evolved world did not bring any benefit to Tai space. It just consumed Yuan Meng's power. As for pulling people into Tai space and absorbing the spiritual thoughts of endless sentient beings to help him evolve Tai space as described in some novels, Yuan Meng wants to say that it is not that he does not want to, but that the baby really can't do it. Not to mention using the power of Tai space to condense the spiritual imprint and guide the minds of other people into Tai space. Even Yuan Meng himself can only rely on the special connection with Tai space to barely sense Tai space after finishing his work. As for guiding the power of Tai space, he can't do it at all. He couldn't even export it from Tai space into Yuan Meng's own body, let alone integrate the spiritual imprint into other people's bodies to guide the spiritual will. Therefore, Yuan Meng's opening up the evolutionary world in Tai space not only did not benefit him at all, but it would also waste his power and prolong the time for him to accumulate power. Therefore, after Yuan Meng opened up the world for the first time, he never opened up the world again. He just practiced silently, constantly accumulating the power of Tai space, waiting for the day when it would change. For a period of time afterwards, Yuan Meng kept entering Tai space to practice, except for eating and resting. Of course, in addition to wanting to practice again faster and make a breakthrough, there was also the reason that he would not feel physical pain in Tai space. And after a period of time, Yuan Meng was finally able to barely suppress the psychological pressure caused by the lonely environment of Tai space, and was able to practice in Tai space for a longer period of time. Moreover, Yuan Meng also found that if he wanted to enter the Tai space, he no longer needed to meditate deliberately. As long as he had a thought, he could enter the Tai space. Therefore, the place where Yuan Meng entered the Tai space to practice has been moved from the practice room to the bed in his bedroom. After all, there are better ways to practice. Why do you have to practice in a boring way of meditation? This also made Yuan Meng's plan to recruit a nanny completely ruined. After all, except for 3 meals a day and necessary hygiene, he basically lies in bed all day long. This is strange no matter how you look at it, so Yuan Meng also gave up the plan to recruit a nanny. He just endured the pain in his body and made some meals casually to fill his stomach. And this crazy practice also made Yuan Meng's practice speed increase again significantly. However, in just a few months, the practice of Tai space has reached perfection. At this point, the Tai space can no longer accommodate even a trace of mental power, and Yuan Meng can also clearly feel the mental power in his mind at ordinary times. However, although Yuan Meng can feel the mental power, he can only feel it and can't do anything with it. He can't use it to control objects to fly, nor can he use it to observe the situation in his body. He is completely locked in the Tai space deep in his mind. This makes Yuan Meng more convinced that the real world is a strictly regulated, purely materialistic world. He doesn't know if he can break the restrictions of the world rules and have a trace of extraordinary power after he breaks through again. However, Yuan Meng feels that it is difficult. After all, this is a world rule restriction, and it is definitely not something he can break casually. In the practice room, Yuan Meng took a few deep breaths, slowly closed his eyes, and sank his mind into the Tai space. Yuan Meng already felt that he had reached the limit of his current realm, so he was ready to break through today. In order to ensure that everything is foolproof, Yuan Meng returned to the practice room and formally sat cross-legged and meditated. Well, although Yuan Meng can enter Tai space at will wherever he is, whether he is lying on the bed or sitting cross-legged in the training room, there is actually not much difference. But in this case, it always seems more solemn, isn't it? If it can increase the success rate even a little bit, isn't it also good? So, Yuan Meng's mind entered Tai space and felt the kind of unrestrained and incomparable power again, and he was intoxicated. However, he soon woke up. Although the power is good, he can't be addicted to it. He wants him to control the power, not to be affected by it. What's more, this power cannot act on the real world. Now it is just an illusory mental fantasy power. Yuan Meng's mind merged into Tai space and began to rapidly contract the power, which can also be said to be contracting Tai space. It has been said before that Tai space is infinitely large and infinitely small. If it is observed under normal circumstances, it should be considered an unfolding state when observed inside Tai space. Then Yuan Meng at this time is contracting and collapsing it inwards. This speed is extremely fast. Even the speed during the Big Bang would probably not be able to catch up with it. Because this place has the characteristics of the spiritual space, for Yuan Meng, in this Tai space, no matter what happens, it is just a matter of his thoughts. So in just a moment, the entire Tai space has completed the extreme contraction, collapsed, condensed into a point with infinite mass and infinitely small volume, and it continues to collapse inward. Finally, with a bang, the Tai space that collapsed into an infinitely small point exploded. But it did not explode directly outward, but exploded inward. That's right, it exploded inward. It directly blew out another space that is deeper than the Tai space. And this layer of space, as soon as it was formed, began to expand rapidly, and in a blink of an eye, it had turned into an infinitely large space. And this space turned into two layers of space, the inner and outer layers of space, which coexist in parallel, depend on each other, and are exactly the same in size. However, their position levels are not exactly the same. The outer space of the newly appeared space is the newly formed normal space, which is one level higher than the original Tei space. Because this layer of space, in addition to the spiritual will of Yuan Meng, has one more thing, or qi. It is invisible and intangible, only a tiny wisp, that is to say, the power of the entire Tei space is compressed and condensed together to form such a wisp, wandering around in the entire space, unpredictable and changing. However, although it is only a tiny wisp, it also makes this space a level higher than the Tei space that only contains Yuan Meng's spiritual will. For this space, Yuan Meng calls it Teishu space. The so-called Teishu is the beginning of Qi without a shape. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 6. In the beginning, the most basic vitality of the universe had begun to be born, but its shape could not be seen. And this wisp of Qi, Yuan Meng called it the Teishu ancestral Qi, is the first wisp of Qi born in Teishu space, and it is also the most original wisp of Qi. Although this wisp of Teishu ancestral Qi is only a wisp, it can evolve into endless Teishu Qi, filling the entire Teishu space. The internal space of this space evolved from the original Tei space. According to normal logic, Tei space should be regarded as the lowest level space, and Teishu space is the advanced version of Tei space. The internal space transformed into Tei space should be one level lower than the external Teishu space. However, in fact, this is not the case. The internal space transformed into Tei space is now at a higher level than Teishu space. That is to say, in Yuan Meng's breakthrough evolution this time, not only did a more advanced Teishu space evolve on the basis of the original Tei space. Tei space itself has evolved twice in succession, directly becoming a more advanced space than Teishu space. Moreover, Yuan Meng can clearly feel that this space is the core of the entire illusory space. Even if the outer Teishu space is completely shattered, it will not hurt him at all. At most, it will only damage him. A part of the power can be quickly derived again. Therefore, it would be somewhat inappropriate for this inner space that evolved from Tei space to continue to be called Tei space. Therefore, Yuan Meng pondered for a long time and decided to rename it the original core space. It can also be called the original space, which is the source and core place of the entire illusory Teishu space. Once the original core space of Tei space evolution collapses, perhaps because of its special existence and the characteristics of illusory spiritual space, it will not cause fatal harm to Yuan Meng. However, it is enough to kill half of his life. As for reuniting and recovering, it is extremely difficult and cannot even be re-evolved. Of course, if the outer Teishu space does not suffer too much damage, then the core original space can also recover slowly, but how is this possible? The core origin space that is the root was destroyed, so how could the Teishu space that was attached to the core space survive? Interdependence also depends on the situation. Only when one party is complete can the other party recover. However, the Teishu space is broken and can be restored quickly, but the inner original space of the Tei space evolution is extremely difficult to restore. Of course, although the outer Teishu space is only newly evolved, it does not mean that Yuan Meng's control over it is weak. Because the Teishu space originally originated from the Tei space, it was already imprinted with Yuan Meng's spiritual will at the beginning of its formation. Naturally, Yuan Meng can also control it as he wishes, but the power it can contain is not as good as the core origin space. After all, the core origin space is more advanced and can naturally accommodate more and stronger power. However, the current origin space is a higher level than the Taisha space. However, there is not even one more existence within it, and nothing else besides Yuan Meng's spiritual will was even born. It just made Yuan Meng's spiritual will more pure and condensed, and there was also a wisp of more subtle and pure Taishu ancestral qi, which was extracted from the Taishu ancestral qi in the Taisha space and integrated into the core original space, becoming the original power in the original space. After feeling all this, Yuan Meng's mind moved and he exited the beginning space. He also wanted to feel the changes in his body after this breakthrough. After all, Yuan Meng's original purpose was to cure his own illness. Now that he had achieved a breakthrough, he naturally wanted to feel whether the illness in his body was getting better. When Yuan Meng's mind returned and he woke up, he immediately felt that his body was different from before. Yuan Meng's mind returned before, and when he woke up, his whole body was basically in pain. But this time, Yuan Meng could still feel the pain all over his body, even more clearly than before. But this time, Yuan Meng didn't feel so unbearable. Because, Yuan Meng felt a ball of heat in his lower abdomen, which was spreading throughout his body. It was warm and ironing, making his entire abdomen feel extremely comfortable. Although it cannot completely relieve Yuan Meng's physical pain, it has no healing effect at all, but it can greatly relieve the physical pain. Of course, this kind of relief could not actually relieve the pain all over Yuan Meng's body, because the heat and effect of this small ball of hot air continued to weaken with the distance it spread. Therefore, this relief effect is mainly concentrated on the abdomen. Beyond this range, the effect will be rapidly weakened, and when it exceeds the trunk, it will have no effect at all. Maybe, but Yuan Meng can no longer feel it. However, although Yuan Meng was slightly disappointed with this, he was full of unprecedented hope for the future at this moment. Yuan Meng believed that as he continued to practice and strengthen the Taisha space, one day the hot air in his lower abdomen would spread throughout his body and relieve the pain all over his body. Even after Yuan Meng made another breakthrough and the Taisha space transformed again, he might not be able to stop the spread of cancer cells, or even completely cure them. Well, the invisible and intangible air in the Taisha space is called Taisha Zuki. Then this ball of hot air in the body is called Taisha Yuankai, the first ray of Yuankai born in the body. Yuan Meng felt the warm Taisha Yuankai in his lower abdomen and felt that it was quite similar to the Yuankai mentioned in Qigong and Gongfa. However, it is still different from the innate Yuankai produced by the body described in those Qigong. This ray of air in Yuan Meng's body was just born because of the Taisha space, so Yuan Meng called it Taisha Yuankai. Perhaps because he saw a glimmer of hope to completely cure cancer, in the following days, Yuan Meng spent more time on cultivation. Yuan Meng's mind wandered in the Taisha space, merged with the strand of Taishu ancestral qi, and began to absorb strands of vitality from his real body. After all, the Taisha space was just an illusory space that Yuan Meng condensed by chance. It did not have the ability to generate energy by itself and could only draw power from the outside world. Although this would make Yuan Meng's body even weaker, it was necessary to do so. After all, Yuan Meng's current body needed to rely on the transformation and advancement of the Taisha space to delay and curb the spread of cancer cells, or even completely cure his cancer. In this case, it would depend on whether the Taisha space would transform and advance first, or whether Yuan Meng's body would not be able to hold on and completely collapse and die. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 7. However, fortunately, perhaps because of the different heights of time and space dimensions, it is often only a wisp of Taisha Yuankai in Yuan Meng's body that can be integrated into Taisha Zuki and then split and derive in large quantities. Only a tiny trace of Taisha Yuankai is needed to make Taisha Zuki split into a group of Taisha Qi the size of a planet. This Taisha Qi also has the characteristic of absorbing energy and growing continuously, but the Taisha Qi produced again is much more complicated and difficult to purify. Unlike the Taisha Qi produced by the splitting of Taisha Zuki, it is extremely pure and condensed. Therefore, Yuan Meng called the Taisha Qi produced by the splitting of Taishizuki, the pure and condensed Taisha Qi, Taishizuki. What? You said that Qi means ventilation, and they should mean the same thing. But this is not other places, this is Yuan Meng's Taisha space, so it is said that it is Yuan Meng who calls it Taishizuki. In Yuan Meng's space, it is natural to follow Yuan Meng's meaning. He said that Taishizuki is higher than Taishizuki, so whether it is the same or higher, it will be a higher level existence. In Yuan Meng's space, he should still have the right to name and classify. And those mixed Taisha Qi are ordinary Taisha Qi. And if Taishizuki devours Taisha Yuankai and splits to derive Taisha Qi, only one strand of the same Taisha Yuankai is enough to produce Taisha Qi covering a star field. With this calculation, don't you think it won't take long for Taisha Qi to spread throughout the Taisha space? However, the fact is not so. After all, Taisha space is too huge. Of course, it didn't take long. Since Yuan Meng spends most of the day practicing, the Taisha Yuankai he absorbs in a day is as many as dozens, and this number is still increasing with the passage of time. Well, of course, Yuan Meng's food is also increasing. Because of cancer, he doesn't eat much at ordinary times, but after the birth of Taisha Yuankai, the food Yuan Meng can eat is increasing day by day. However, Yuan Meng has expected this situation. After all, Taisha Yuankai does not come out of thin air. Extracting and condensing Taisha Yuankai naturally requires a lot of energy. Therefore, Yuan Meng also bought a lot of high-energy food and some health-preserving and tonic things, such as some ginseng and Ganoderma lucidum. If Yuan Meng didn't have a small fortune, I'm afraid this step would take him a lot of time. According to Yuan Meng's calculations, under the condition of maintaining the normal operation of the human body, a normal person can only extract 10 strands of Taisha Yuankai in a day. If more, it will hurt the root. Not to mention that Yuan Meng is also suffering from a terminal illness. If there is no maintenance of these tonic things, I'm afraid he can only extract 3 or 2 strands of Taisha Yuankai a day at most. Moreover, even with the supplement of these tonics, his body was getting thinner and weaker day by day. This was naturally because Yuan Meng extracted too much Taisha Yuankai, which caused the energy in his body to be unable to keep up. After all, there is still a saying that the weak cannot be supplemented, and Yuan Meng cannot absorb it recklessly. After all, the digestion and absorption capacity of the human body also has its limits. Naturally, the energy absorbed could not keep up with the speed of Yuan Meng's absorption and condensation of Taisha Yuankai. In addition, the pressure and damage caused by Yuan Meng's squeezing of his body and extracting Yuankai were no less than the cancer cells in his body. If it were not for the Taisha Yuankai, which also had the ability to assist digestion and absorption, Yuan Meng would not have died of cancer after eating so many high-energy tonics. He would have died because of the collapse of his body functions. Fortunately, as Yuan Meng continued to practice, the Taisha Yuankai in his body increased, which also made his digestion and absorption ability stronger and stronger, so that he could keep up with his increasing absorption of Taisha Yuankai. In the end, the Taisha Yuankai had spread all over Gu Yuan's body. Although it could not inhibit the spread of cancer cells, it could relieve his pain and greatly enhance his ability to absorb and digest. In the end, Yuan Meng could even absorb energy from his body while eating, and he could absorb and transform hundreds of strands of Taisha Yuankai in a day. Of course, the consequence of doing so was that Yuan Meng's body became skinny, as if he was a skeleton covered with a layer of human skin. The cancer cells in his body were almost all over his body. If it were not for the support of the Taisha Yuankai, even if Yuan Meng had a strong mental will, his body would have collapsed and he would have died. Even with such desperate practice, it took Yuan Meng half a year to spread the Taisha ancestral qi throughout the Taisha space. As for the Taisha qi, since it is possible to evolve a higher level of Taisha ancestral qi, Yuan Meng would be stupid to evolve those ordinary Taisha qi. The strand of pure Taishu ancestral qi in the core origin space also increased by hundreds of times, and was as big as a basketball. Next, Yuan Meng prepared to break through again. Logically speaking, Yuan Meng should continue to practice, and even fill the core origin space with the pure Taishu ancestral qi, and then break through, which is the best choice. However, Yuan Meng's body couldn't wait any longer. Not to mention that the cancer cells in his body had spread all over his body. Even if there were no cancer cells, his body would have already run out of energy. In other words, if Yuan Meng didn't break through quickly, then what awaited him was still inevitable death, at most less pain. Like the last breakthrough, Yuan Meng's mind merged with the entire Taishu space and the core origin space. As his mind moved, the two layers of space began to shrink and condense rapidly. In the end, the entire two layers of space merged into one, and condensed into an infinitely small singularity, and then collapsed and exploded inward. When this singularity unfolded again, it had formed a triple space that was intertwined and fused together, but independent of each other, with different strengths. The original core origin space, Taishu space, and the newly formed space, Yuan Meng called it Taishi space. Taishi is the beginning of form, but it has no substance. At this point, qi is no longer invisible and intangible. It wanders in the Taishi space, emitting a warm and moist glow. At this time, the qi can already be observed in a specific form. However, the qi at this time has no actual substance or quality, and it cannot be touched by people. And this qi in the Taishi space is precisely the condensed and qualitatively transformed Taishizuki, which can be called Taishizuki. This Taishizuki also has the various characteristics of Taishizuki, and can evolve Taishizuki and Taishi qi. It is located in the outermost layer, and is also the latest formed and the weakest place in the three layers of space. And similarly, it is also one level stronger than the Taishu space and Taishizuki before the breakthrough. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 8. And now the Taishu space in the inner layer, after this evolution, is one level stronger than the current Taishi space. And the Taishu ancestral qi and Taishu ancestral qi in it have been completely consumed in this breakthrough evolution. There is a strand of extremely pure and condensed Taishi ancestral qi drawn from the Taishi space, which is stronger than the Taishi ancestral qi in the Taishi space. However, this layer of space can't be called Taishi space. Looking at the strand of pure and condensed Taishi ancestral qi, Yuan Meng thought to himself. Looking at the core origin space in the middle, well, let's call it inner space, a more advanced layer of space in the Taishi space. And the innermost core origin space is one level stronger than the current Taishu space. And the Taishu ancestral qi in it has undergone a qualitative change in this breakthrough evolution, and it is even beyond the scope of Taishi ancestral qi. In the end, Yuan Meng decided to call it original ancestral qi, which is the strongest and most fundamental qi in Yuan Meng's space. It can evolve any kind of qi that has existed or exists in Yuan Meng's space, including the supreme ancestral qi. Of course, the original ancestral qi in the core origin space at this time is just a wisp. It wanders around in the core origin space, sometimes emitting a warm and misty light, and sometimes disappearing and changing. Yuan Meng's mind withdrew from the Taishi space, and he felt warm all over his body, just like soaking in a hot spring, very comfortable, and the pain in his whole body before has been greatly reduced. The Taishu Yuankai that was previously all over the body has now turned into a wisp of Yuankai in the lower abdomen danshan. However, although it is only a wisp, it has an amazing effect, emitting a warmth that spreads to all parts of the body, eliminating the pain in the body. This is also what Yuan Meng felt after waking up. In order to synchronize with the Taishi space, Yuan Meng naturally called this ray of energy in the Danshan Taishi Yuankai. And now, as long as Yuan Meng closes his eyes, he can look inside his body, although he can only see the energy in his body now, and cannot see the tissues and organs in his body. However, Yuan Meng can know a little about the situation in his body based on the distribution of the energy in his body and the changes in the color of the energy. In the Danshan is a ray of Taishi Yuankai emitting a white glow, and there are layers of white light mist. It does not pass through the acupuncture points, but passes through the Danshan barrier, ignoring the various meridians and flesh and blood tissues of Yuan Meng's body, and directly spreads outside the Danshan in circles, all over the body. And the other tissues and organs in the body also emit various lights. The light in the heart is red like fire, the liver area is green like grass and trees, the spleen is light yellow and heavy like the earth, the lungs are shining with a light golden luster, and the kidneys are cool like water, but they are a ball of black light. And no matter where in the body, there is a layer of light red light, which should be the energy of the body's chi and blood, representing the body's life strength. But no matter where in the body, there are dots of gray fog covering it, and the liver and lung areas are completely covered by gray fog. This should represent the cancerous area in Yuan Meng's body. When the vital energy flows here, it will be slightly blocked and slightly dim. However, although the color light representing various parts of the body has been weakened to varying degrees and covered with a layer of gray fog, but the red chi and blood light representing the strength of life shows completely opposite characteristics. In Yuan Meng's body, the area that is not covered by gray fog basically presents a light red light. And the area close to the gray fog is flickering. Sometimes it dims instantly and is almost invisible, sometimes it returns to normal light red, and sometimes it turns into deep red, blazing like fire, burning Yuan Meng's life. The cancerous area shrouded in gray fog was blooming with dazzling bright red, showing the strong vitality there. Well, Yuan Meng was not happy at all, but even more bitter, because that was a cancerous area. This situation could only mean that the cancerous cells were stronger, which was naturally of no benefit to him. The reason why the area where the two intersect was flickering was probably the result of the normal cells and the cancerous cells engulfing and transforming each other. Seeing this situation, Yuan Meng could only smile helplessly. It seemed that the cancer cells in his body had really spread completely. Yuan Meng had a glimmer of luck before, but now what he saw in his inner vision completely broke his fantasy. However, there was also good news, that is, perhaps because of the Taishi Yuankai, the spread of the cancerous area in Yuan Meng's body at this time, although not completely suppressed, has slowed down. This shows that Yuan Meng's current direction is right. As long as he continues to practice and quickly break through, there is hope of completely curing cancer. Seeing the hope of completely curing the cancer in his body, Yuan Meng naturally paid more attention to cultivation. Except for the necessary rest, he spent almost 24 hours a day on cultivation, including eating and going to the bathroom. In fact, when he was resting, he also entered the Taishi space and became familiar with everything in the Taishi space, but he did not absorb the vitality in his body. It's not that Yuan Meng doesn't want to continue to absorb vitality. If possible, he would like to devote all 24 hours a day to practice. But the body has its limits after all, and Yuan Meng's current body is on the verge of collapse. Even with the assistance of vitality, constantly swallowing food and converting and absorbing vitality energy is a huge burden on the stomach and other organs in the body. Therefore, Yuan Meng could only take time out to take a certain amount of rest in order to allow his body to recover a little. When Yuan Meng devoted himself to practice, time passed quickly, and more than half a year had passed soon. For more than half a year, as Yuan Meng continued to practice, the Taishi ancestral qi in Taishi space continued to increase. At the same time, the Taishi Yuan qi in his body also continued to grow until it spread throughout his body. And its inhibition of cancer cells is getting stronger and stronger, otherwise Yuan Meng wouldn't even be able to survive half a year. However, Yuan qi has never been able to completely inhibit the spread of cancer cells. Even with the warmth and nourishment of Taishi Yuankai, Yuan Meng now feels a little weak even in the usual cooking and walking, which makes him feel more and more urgent at this time. Therefore, When the Taishi ancestral qi in Taishi space filled the entire Taishi space, Yuan Meng immediately began to make breakthroughs. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 9. Just a simple thought, the Taishi space began to collapse and shrink rapidly, turning into an infinitely small singularity. Then it expanded again, and the original 3-layer Taishi space had become 4 layers. The first layer was the latest layer of space that had evolved. Naturally, it was also 1 level stronger than the previous Taishi space, and there was also a strand of qi that had actual substantial mass and was tangible and substantial. Taisu is the beginning of quality but not yet formed. Therefore, Yuan Meng called this layer of space Taisu space, and that strand of qi was called Taisuzuki by Yuan Meng. As for the layers of space inside, I will not go into details one by one. It is nothing more than a higher level of space, and the power contained in it is also more refined and higher. The origin of the core origin space has also made a step forward after this evolution. The Taishi Yuankai in Yuan Meng's body was also transformed into Taisu Yuankai, and its various characteristics and functions were greatly enhanced. What made Yuan Meng most excited was that the tangible Taisu Yuankai could really inhibit the spread of cancer cells. In other words, although it could not transform cancer cells back into normal cells, it could already prevent the spread of cancer cells. That is to say, as long as there were no special circumstances, Yuan Meng could survive normally now, but he would become weak and powerless because of the existing cancer cells, but it would not affect his normal life. However, Yuan Meng did not relax, but instead devoted himself to cultivation with more heart and soul. Now that he had the opportunity to completely cure his cancer, how could Yuan Meng not seize it? He, Yuan Meng, wanted to completely cure his cancer and did not want to die young again. And this time, Yuan Meng spent a full year to fill the entire Taisu space with Taisuzuki and began to break through. After the breakthrough, as expected, the whole world turned into a space world where 5 layers of space overlapped and merged into one, and it evolved significantly. In this space, there is a wisp of air that looks gray and chaotic, but it seems to contain all the colors of the world. At this time, the air is already a real and concrete existence. Yuan Meng called this newly born space the chaos space, and the newly born air was called chaos ancestor qi. As the saying goes, Tai Chi is the beginning of the body and the yin and yang are not yet separated. Tai Chi can also be called chaos. So this space can be called chaos space or Tai Chi space, but since it is Yuan Meng's world, its name must naturally follow Yuan Meng's meaning. Yuan Meng called it chaos space, so after that it is chaos space. Ha ha ha. When Yuan Meng's mind returned and he looked inward to sense the situation in his body, he was immediately overjoyed and couldn't help laughing out loud. As he laughed, tears rolled down his cheeks. Because the vitality in Yuan Meng's body had already transformed into chaotic vitality at this time, although this made him happy, it didn't make him lose his composure. What really made Yuan Meng lose his composure was that when the wisp of chaotic vitality in his danshan was wandering in his body, the blood energy, which was originally just normal light red, was gradually deepening and becoming bright and lively. And the gray fog covering the organ areas of different colors in the body was being assimilated by the chaotic vitality and was changing to their original colors. And those cancerous areas that were originally deep red in blood and qi gradually began to fade, although the speed of this transformation was extremely slow. But this means that the cancerous cells in Yuan Meng's body are gradually turning into normal cells. In other words, as long as a period of time passes, Yuan Meng's cancer will be cured without medicine, and even his physical fitness will become stronger, which is the reason why he lost his composure. From now on, Yuan Meng can be a normal person. Arriving here, Yuan Meng could have relaxed and had a good rest for a while. He had not been in contact with the outside world for more than a year. Even the 3 or 2 friends he knew mostly contacted him by phone, and they were the first to contact him. Yuan Meng's mind during this period was all on cultivation. He didn't even have enough time for cultivation, so he naturally didn't want to go out. Yuan Meng's friends, however, all had families and couldn't always come to him, so most of them communicated by phone. Although he still felt weak, Yuan Meng was in a good mood. He rarely cooked a good meal to reward himself for his hard work during this period. Lying on the recliner in the courtyard, watching the setting sun, Yuan Meng did not feel sad at all this time, but felt that the scenery was beautiful and the sun was bright. It must be said that a person's mood can really affect a person's view of things. Even if it is the same thing, the same scenery, the effect is completely different when you look at it in different moods. When you are happy, even if it is rainy and cloudy, you will still feel the fresh air and happy. When you are sad, even if the scenery is beautiful and the sun is shining, you will feel that the world is gloomy and your mood is irritable. In the end, Yuan Meng did not leave the villa, but just called and had a good chat with his friends for a while, and then he returned to his usual life. One reason is that he gradually got used to this kind of fulfilling life of watching himself improve little by little and constantly practicing. Another reason is that after this big change, Yuan Meng has completely let go. No matter how much money a person has and how much power he has, in the end, he is still a handful of yellow earth, and nothing is left. Instead of trying to make a living for those things outside of your body, it is better to let go of them and enjoy life to the fullest. What Yuan Meng wants most now is to continue to practice as soon as possible and cure his cancer as soon as possible. Well, if possible, by the way, realize his little ambition, such as immortality, or even becoming an immortal. In the past, Yuan Meng would naturally not think so, but now, it is not necessarily impossible to fantasize. Yuan Meng has a space formed by the reflection of his body. As long as he continues to evolve to a higher level, his real body will also evolve continuously. Just like the chaotic energy in his body now, it can slowly strengthen his body. This can be seen from the light red blood that is constantly deepening and becoming more vivid and bright. The journey of creation from fantasy to reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 10. Yuan Meng looked inside his body and found that his current internal vision had exceeded the scope of being able to observe vital energy before. That's right, he can now truly observe various tissues and organs in the body. Unlike before, just observing the situation in the body based on the outline of the vitality energy in the body. The pounding heart, the lungs rising and falling, the peristaltic intestines and stomach, and the kidneys distributed on both sides of the waist, all appeared in his mind one by one. If Yuan Meng continues to practice like this, as he continues to make breakthroughs, will he be able to observe more subtle objects and even cells? If he could reach this point, could he use the chaotic energy in his body to repair the damaged cells in his body, or even transform them? In the end, it has maintained sufficient vitality and can continue to split under his control. In that case, can Yuan Meng achieve an alternative kind of eternal life? Every time he thought of this, Yuan Meng felt uncontrollably excited. He doesn't even feel that his current life of ascetic cultivation is boring at all. Compared with the expectation of eternal life in the future, the momentary happiness now is nothing. Immortality, isn't it fragrant? And this practice lasted another 2 years. Perhaps it was because Yuan Meng's body was gradually improving, and he was able to digest and absorb more and more energy for transformation. Therefore, even the quality of Chaos Yuan Qi and Chaos Ancestral Qi far exceeds that of Taisu Yuan Qi and Taisu Ancestral Qi. In the past 2 years, Yuan Meng was not only able to completely cure cancer in his body. At the same time, the chaotic ancestral energy filled the entire chaotic space, allowing for another breakthrough. And Yuan Meng had nothing to hesitate. He simply came to his practice room again, sat cross-legged on the futon, closed his eyes, and sank into the chaotic space. The will of the mind is integrated into all spaces in the chaotic space, naturally including the core original space, and directly controls the entire chaotic space, starting to collapse towards an infinitesimal point. Then it continued to collapse inward and evolved to form a higher dimensional space. However, compared with before, the situation has undergone some completely different changes. Hey! What's going on? After completing the breakthrough, Yuan Meng was surprised to find that after the space expanded this time, no new space was formed like before. Although space has indeed evolved, the chaos ancestral chi in the chaotic space has also evolved. All the chaos ancestral chi has been condensed into one. However, it is still the chaos ancestral chi. Yuan Meng can clearly perceive this. Although its quality level has been improved, there is no change in its essence. It still belongs to the chaos ancestral chi, but it has not been transformed into anything else. Form of energy. On the contrary, the previously distinct spaces were completely merged together at this time, turning into a space world with infinite time and space dimensions and layers of time and space intertwined. And on top of these layers of infinite space-time dimensions, at the core of the world, there is the original space of the world. These layers of infinite space-time dimensions are all derived from the original space, and then intertwined and fused in mysterious ways, which evolved into today's chaotic space. The original ancestral chi in the original space has also undergone earth-shaking changes. It does not have a specific image. It has been changing between tangible and intangible, with form and without form, and its color is also unpredictable. The original space is the core origin of the infinite space-time dimensions, and the original ancestral chi is naturally the source of all other energies, including the chaotic ancestral chi swimming in the chaotic space. Its essence in Yuan Meng's space is extremely high. It can evolve everything in Yuan Meng's space. Compared with before, after this breakthrough, the quality of array of original ancestral energy was already on the same level as the chaotic energy in his real body. In other words, after the two convert each other, there will be an equal conversion rate of 1:1. Seeing this situation in the chaotic space naturally made Yuan Meng extremely surprised. He didn't understand what was going on. Will the space in the future not increase again? And the energy in the chaotic space, is there only this kind of chaotic energy? Even if it is a breakthrough, it will only increase in quantity and become more pure and concise, but it will not evolve into other energy forms again, nor undergo a qualitative transformation. Looking at the wisp of chaotic ancestral energy in the chaotic space, Yuan Meng was in a daze. As for the infinite space-time dimensions, although it seems that there are an infinite amount of different time spaces. However, Yuan Meng knew instinctively that this was a completely different state from the previous hierarchies of space. In essence, they all belong to chaotic space, which is lower than the original space. I thought for a long time. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Yuan Meng's mind, and he thought of the mythical novel about the great god Pangu who created the world out of chaos and evolved the prehistoric world. So does it mean that after the chaotic space is formed, it will start to create a new world and evolve a new world to drive the evolution of the entire world? The more Yuan Meng thought about it, the more he felt that this idea was feasible, but after looking at the chaotic space with only an array of chaotic ancestral energy, Yuan Meng could only give up the idea of opening up the world temporarily. Even if his idea is feasible and is the next evolutionary direction, it will take time until the chaos ancestral chi fills the entire chaos space again. The mind returns to the body and feels the situation in the body. At this time, not only is the chaos yuan chi in the body more refined, but the tempering of the body is more powerful, almost visible to the naked eye. The color of the body's blood is gradually becoming more vivid and bright, and the red color is evaporating. Obviously, Yuan Meng's body is getting better at this time, and even becoming stronger, far more powerful than before. And the observation of the body is more meticulous. Although cells cannot be observed, substances the size of a needle tip can be observed. I believe that after Yuan Meng breaks through again, he should be able to observe a level close to cells. Now that the direction has been found, then next, it is natural to move forward in that direction and continue to work hard. Next, Yuan Meng started a new round of eating and drinking again. No, it should be another round of practice. And this in-depth practice took another 3 years. After more than 6 years of hard work, it was finally time to reap the rewards. Looking at the chaotic space filled with endless chaotic ancestral energy in front of him, Yuan Meng was full of emotion. After realizing that the next path was to create the world and evolve the world, Yuan Meng already knew that the previous evolution of space and energy was just the foundation. Only the next creation of the world could truly evolve his own space completely and get on the right track. Yuan Meng had already thought about which method he would use to create the world and evolve the world. Yuan Meng would not choose the Big Bang in the real world, the 7-day creation of the world, or the planting of a world tree. Since it is the creation of the world, let's really create the world. When it comes to the creation of the world, almost all people will instinctively think of Pangu, the god who created the world. And what Yuan Meng chose was naturally the way of Pangu.